I'd like to know, hold up on screen, how Ron Paul would explain economic crises before the Fed was created. It can't be all the Fed's fault.
That is a good question, because there were certainly booms and busts, but there was a lot of times inflation by fractional reserve banking that wasn't prohibited. We certainly had a lot of inflation during war times, whether it was 1812 or whether they inflated, especially during the Civil War period. Matter of fact, they went totally off the gold standard in the Civil War period. But it was always excessive credit. That means we did not have a perfect system before. But if you took the long term, say from the beginning of our country up until 1913, because they usually would go back to restraining the effort, to inflate, prices remain relatively stable, long term. It's only been since 1913, especially since 1971, when the last winter of gold has been removed. So those dips and crises that occurred, they usually were short-lived, because they got out of whack by excessive credit, going into the market, a lot of speculation, but they knew to leave it alone. They didn't try to prop up all the bad investments and the bad debt. There was no rescue operation, and it was over rather quickly. But this argument's going on for a long time. Jefferson and Hamilton argued about this, about a central bank, and we had two central banks early in our history, and Jefferson got rid of one and Jackson got rid of the other one. So it's an ongoing process. But it's the secretness and the power that exists with the central bank that finally usually arouses the people to the point in saying, this is a bad deal. We need to know more about what's going on.
We have about 15 more minutes with Ron Paul. Next telephone call is from Port Charlotte, Florida. This is John, Independent Line.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good morning.
Bill, I have a question for you. There was, going back, I think it was January or February of this year, there was a story that broke about a couple of guys trying to smuggle, I think it was $135 billion worth of government securities into Italy. And there was rumors, the Federal Reserve was involved. But that story seemed to have dropped as quick as it came on the scene. Do you have any update on that?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. I remember reading that, but I don't know exactly what was going on now. But, it reminds me of the stories which were verified of us shipping carloads of cash over into Iraq to be distributed, literally billions of dollars of cash, and there was no auditing of that process. They don't really know exactly where this cash went into Iraq. So a lot of those things happen, but maybe something like that would come out in an audit, but I'm afraid even with an audit, they will be able to cover their trails and cover up most of that kind of stuff.
If the legislation coming out of Chairman Barney Frank's Financial Services Committee, which you are a member, becomes law, will the economy be in a better state or worse?
I think it'll be in worse shape even if it has the audit provision in it. It's a tremendous amount of regulation, and Chairman Frank has been sympathetic to having more transparency in the Fed. He didn't vote for my amendment, but he did nothing to try to prohibit it, and he's been very fair, and he said it's going to be in the final bill, and he knows that I will vote against the final bill. That will be helpful, but overall, and Chairman Frank has heard me say this so many times, you can't compensate for the mistakes of the Fed by regulators thinking that we create all these mistakes and prices going up and artificial interest rates and mistakes are made. You can say, well, if we just have regulation there, we'll cancel out all those mistakes. I just see this as an impossible task. I want regulation, but I want it to be free market regulations. I want bankruptcies to occur, and I want, of course, transparency of the Fed. I want Treasury regulated so we know what they're doing. But the regulations that are packed into that bill reminds me of the kind of regulations that we did in the mid-30s, which prolonged the Depression.
One viewer took away from what you just said. So Ron Paul has decided even before an audit that the audit would do no good. Interesting.
Well, no, of course, if we had an audit, we're going to do a lot of good if it's a true audit. But the whole thing is the question was, well, it cancels out those regulations, and no. So the audit will not correct all our mistakes if we're making more mistakes, and it really isn't meant to solve the problems. It's meant to get to the seat of the problem, because my bill actually purposely got away from managing the money supply and monetary policy. because it would have been too controversial. We have 313 co-sponsors, but they would have never co-sponsored if I said, oh, this is to interfere and regulate the money supply. That's what would happen. So no, things do not get better just with an audit, except that is a stepping stone to find out who are the beneficiaries and what kind of mischief they're in, and hopefully that would lead to a more commonsensical approach to monetary policy.
Kansas City, Missouri, Sean, Democrats line.
Yes, thank you, CSPAN, for taking my call. And I would like to ask Ron Paul 2 questions. Could these corporations be tried as treason that deal with China, being that they're using their profits to build their military, to aim their missiles at us? And 2, that during the Korean War, China killed a lot of American troops. And being that we're in such a bad shape in our country, why do we keep giving billions to all the other countries, you know, to aid them, like Israel and Egypt, Saudi Arabia? You know, ain't that hurting us too?
Yeah, it is, but businessmen doing business with China is not treason. But us being in the arms business, selling weapons around the world, whether it's to Israel or the Arabs, I mean, we arm both sides of all the conflicts, and most of the time the weapons end up being used against us. So I think that is very bad. But not doing business with China would be like saying, let's not do business with Japan, let's not do business with Germany. China has changed. I mean, they're not, they don't believe in individual liberty like we do. But, boy, I'll tell you what, in some areas, they believe in economic freedom. I mean, it's easier to start businesses over there, and they're prosperous, people save, and they do some things that we used to be known for. They have become a banker. So I would say that, yes, those kind of things happened in the Korean War, but I don't even think we should have been involved in the Korean War. It was a tragedy. What were we doing over there? What were we doing in Vietnam? So I just don't think, coming down hard on China and saying that they're all at fault, I think if they're willing to trade and be honest with us, we should treat them more like Japan and Germany, because they killed a lot more Americans than the Chinese did.